Hello, I'm Colin Green, and you are listening to Spike Pit. I hope wherever you're listening, this episode finds you well. Myself, I've got a bit of a busy day, headed off to Harry Potter World with my youngest son to do the studio tour. He's a big fan, and we're both very much looking forward to it. Talking of looking forward to things, I hope you're looking forward to this, the final part in the discussion, the little chat I had with Karl Rodriguez, the GMologist. Big thanks to Karl for taking part in this. As I said before, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Without any further ado, let's get to it. Next episode, I'm thinking to put out some actual play, so tune in for that one. In the meantime, let's hear what Karl's got to say. I'm pretty well known for liking the odd game of 5th edition D&D. A bit like we talked about the flexibility of Savage Worlds. I find the core engine of 5e very understandable and very, very useful, very flexible. Have you dabbled much with the different hacks?
Recently finished a small adventure in Iron Kingdoms 5e, and Iron Kingdoms is like a steampunk. It's not traditional fantasy. It's kind of a steampunk. They have railroads. They have guns. So I don't know if that's a hack or not. It originally was incarnated in 3.5, and they had their own system, Privateer Press, for a while. But they've decided to have their latest incarnation be 5th edition. And I mean, the base always works. You're right. D&D 5e is a simple system. I don't know honestly if it translates perfectly for the Iron Kingdoms verse. They just didn't, and I think the onus is on the authors. They just didn't describe how magic works in the world very well in the context of the 5e rule set. Right? They just assume that the GM will figure it out, which is unfortunate. I mean, I played more or less straight 5e, and because I do like 5e for vanilla fantasy, right? So I would love to do a game set in Eberron, which is also a little different, not your generic fantasy. But I've always liked, for example, the Forgotten Realms, and I mean I played Forgotten Realms when it first came out, AD&D first edition, and had a long running game set in the Realms, and we switched over to 2nd edition. I ran a Realms campaign in 3rd edition, so I like that. I have all these different 5e based games. Oh, I have. So one that worked really well that our group liked was Carbon 2185. Yeah, that one worked really well. I think the class system, the authors did a really good job of implementing the 5e rules and putting it into like the sort of different classes and level up system that D&D is famous for, and we liked it. I think the players liked the options a lot. You know, this was kind of our backup game when not everyone showed up for the previous Warhammer Fantasy. So I think we talked about picking it up, you know, if we don't have a quorum for Warhammer Fantasy. But it's worked even with 1 or 2 players missing. I mean, it'd be really hard. You'd be really hard pressed to run a game if like 3 players. Well, I could still do it. But it definitely is probably going to be our backup game. You know, if we at an important point in the campaign and someone can't show up, you know, we could play that. And I have like some science fiction-y hacks. You know, I do have the Star Wars hack, and I'd like to implement that. I think if I ran a Clone Wars game, I'd use that because of all the different species that are in that book, in that set of documents, right? So, and I have like Esper Genesis, and there's a Kickstarter I did called Farsight that looked really cool. It was like kind of that space opera vibe with different species that's not Star Wars that I'd like to run one of these days. So,
what about there's a couple of Greek myth inspired ones?
I haven't. You know, I think I ran an adventure that used a 5e hack for a Greek themed game that was very Greek themed. And that was it was set during the Trojan War, right? The adventure was set with the backdrop of the Trojan War.
All right.
And that one I thought worked really nice. It definitely evoked a Greek feel, but it was, you know, it didn't depart that much there are some options to depart from 5e, but it didn't seem really worth it. The initiative system could have departed from your basic 5e, but the initiative system in D&D 5e is pretty easy, so I don't know why you want to make it more complex. And I mean, I'm all about, as I get older, I'm more about ease of play so we can explore the narrative as opposed to figuring out the fiddly rules.
Definitely, I wholeheartedly agree with you on that one. I can't be bothered to try and unravel complex rule sets. I just want to try and get the game to the table, get it played, and not be intimidated. If there's something that I stumble over, it's just going to put me off of playing it, and it won't happen. There's just too many other games. It's got to be easy.
Yeah, the beauty of the 5e, I'm trying to think like what is common about these hacks that makes them different or helps them to promote the particular genre, and that I think is a front-loaded character creation that you have in 5e. There's a lot of, it's not difficult, but there's a lot of parts to it, right? So I think the Greek game that I ran, this particular Greek game that I ran, it evoked the Trojan War and the Greek theme feel because each character class that they had like something Greek, right? Like the Myrmidon, the people from Myrmidia were hoplites. The character from Ithaca, where Odysseus is from, was like a trickster, right? So it was kind of cool that they had that, and I believe that I feel like the same way in the Iron Kingdoms they had particular classes built for that world that made it work. Like they had the warcaster, the mage, the caster who controls steam jacks in that game, right? So I think that's pretty neat, and I don't know how the 5e does because I haven't delved deep into it, but I'm assuredly that they have the classes are what makes it not vanilla fantasy, right? It's not the rules part, the combat part necessarily. I mean, you might add different types of weapons, but it's like it's when you get to your third level, your character archetype, right? It's a different archetypes.
I mean, exactly. This is how I think 5e gets to enjoy the success that it's enjoying, is because it hooks people in. It hooks players specifically with all that stuff. Most of the time when you hear people talking and saying that, well, 5e is not really their game of choice, they're normally the DM or the GM, the person running it. They can find, if you're running a game, it doesn't matter what game you're playing, there's always loads for you to do because you're the guy that's got to come up with all the stuff initially, at least. But if you're a player, when you're a GM looking to hook players in, 5e and some of these 5e hacks do a really good job of making it look appealing and getting people's imaginations fired up. And as a GM, you might be thinking, oh, wow, that's a lot of stuff for me to try and get my head around. But when you're the player, you're only worried about one of those things. And
the character creation.
Exactly, yeah. And especially if you're playing with younger players, every day in my house, my son will be coming up to me talking about, oh, my character, I could do this. Oh, when we play D&D on Monday, I'm going to do this. I'll speak to my uncle and we'll do this, blah, blah, blah. And he just, he loves all that stuff. And like you say, if you want to get across the flavour of a different genre or whatever, you've really got to give all that side of it some serious thought to carry over that flavour and get people into it.
Yeah.
It's them powers, them buffs, and and I think they know that WotC and these other designers, they know that, and I think they do a pretty decent job of that task.
Yeah.
So that's about all I got for gaming. I was just going to finish up with a few kind of maybe things that we could skip over quite quickly. This is something that crops up quite often. People talking about their favourite die type. What is the GMologist die of choice?
Well, of course, I'm gonna say it's a D10 because I like percentile dice and percentile dice systems. So,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I use that for Call of Cthulhu. I use that for Warhammer Fantasy. Uh, so I like the D10. It's you can take two of them and say one is the tens place. You can use that fancy percentile dice thingy that some sets have. And yeah, I'd say the D10.
Okay, the D10. War games. Now, we mentioned a little bit of some GW products I've got to mention. Are there any other war games that you have dabbled in or intend to dabble in or currently dabble in, perhaps?
I played the Warhammer 40K and fantasy. They almost are requirements. I don't know. Actually, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day. We're talking about but I don't know, the day of the big armies is past. I think I'd rather do some small type stuff. And GW's coming with a new kill team box soon that's got orcs and a human faction in it. So I might jump into that. I did dabble in a skirmish game that Privateer Press has. I think it's War Machine that they had.
Okay.
Yeah, so I had a War Machine army, but I haven't played that in a long time. It just got a frustration among players, as maybe you've experienced this, is that you just get into and you collect everything, and then they switch editions on you, and then some of your and GW is notorious for this. Then some of your units don't work as they used to. They get take the nerf bat that's taken to them. Some units become obsolete at the worst example.
Yep.
So that kind of discouraged me from playing or collecting these, but I might get, like I said, back into Kill Team again. I haven't really played any other ones. They just haven't appealed to me. I think Infinity appealed to me for like a few seconds, the Infinity, but I just never. Everyone plays Warhammer, right? It's like everyone plays D&D 5e.
Yeah, it does seem like that.
The minis for Infinity are really cool. I've done some Kickstarters, but there's no one around to play, right?
Organising games, unless you're going to play on one of these like tabletop simulators, it is, I don't know. I was always in a wargaming club, so that was quite good.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's quite a good way to get games in because people are regularly going to turn up. That was weekly, and you'd always get a game.
Yeah, there's a historical minis club at Dragon's Lair, the gaming store I frequent, and used to work for when I was in a graduate school. So, yeah, they have like a historical minis game, and they play. Well, they run a lot of different minis, like all the Warlord games, miniatures games. Yeah. So the historical ones, the World War II one especially, but they also
bolt action.
Yeah, bolt action. That's it. They have their big bolt action. But they run Napoleonic.
Yeah. The one game that I always enjoyed, and I felt it hit the sweet spot for quite a few different things because it's got miniatures. It's almost a bit board game like, and you still get a little bit of a war game vibe as well. And that was Blood Bowl. Did you ever have a Blood Bowl team?
No, I never did that. I always wanted to, but just never.
See, that would have crossed your streams. You could have brought in some sporting interest, and there you go. You missed out there.
I know. My friend Cliff had this awesome look. I probably would have done I probably could grab like some of my Skaven minis. I have it, and I could implement them in Blood Bowl. But my friend had this really sweet female dwarf Blood Bowl team.
All right.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I got a nice greenskins one.
Definitely custom,
Yeah.
I think it probably took the heads from either Empire minis or Sisters of Battle and put them onto squat bodies.
The good thing is you're only ever really going to have 15 or 20 miniatures for that. So if you want to get into some really exotic conversions, it's the perfect time to do it. A little bit like any of their skirmish games, really, like Necromunda as well. That was a big favourite for me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it'd be fun to have like a Dark Elf Blood Bowl team. That could be fun. Those are some cool minis there.
Yeah, I had a really early Dark Elf team. It was all lead. The miniatures are a classic 80s Dark Elves. They're not sculpted like they are now. They're quite basic, but they're still nice. Have you got any current miniatures projects on the go?
No, other than speculating about that the new Kill Team box that might be coming out. I think I was talking to a friend if he wanted to split it, or I'll put them together, you paint them, type of thing. I'd like to play it. He said if I do get a Kill Team together that we could play. So I have someone. I do have I think I have a Space Wolf Scouts group.
Oh, right.
That I could, looks pretty cool that I could put together. And I guess you could, with all the, I think I have an Eldar army that I could put a Kill Team together with too. So maybe when the rules set comes out, we can play it. Although I think it's already out on PDF, he said. So maybe I should try to figure out how I can mix and match some of my minis in the armies I have.
So on the subject of future plans, you might get this Kill Team thing up and running. But in a recent episode of somebody's podcast, it may well have been yours, but there's so many podcasts with RPG a day. I've given up all hope of trying to unravel it all in my head. But you were talking about writing, and maybe it was when we was talking about writing, on the theme of writing, you'd mentioned some play testing that you'd done in a game, and you'd said that you'd always fancied to do some more work for publication, maybe like I don't know, like an adventure or something like that. Do you think we'll see you putting some serious thought in that direction at some point?
I think so. I think I more and more I'm wanting to either do like a random encounter, like in Savage Worlds and Deadlands. You have this random encounter, a set of tables, and you draw cards, and then they give you like a tag, and you try to figure out how to create an adventure for that. So that's been pretty fun, and my players have enjoyed those a little more than your published adventures.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Invictus was all my own thing as well, and that went really well. That came over really well, but it's just a bunch of outlines and notes. However, I had thought of before the pandemic, I was getting together like an adventure. I was going to run it at local conventions because I had seen, who is it? Shane Ivey from Arc Dream Publishing. They make Delta Green. One of the adventures that he ran at conventions eventually became published, and he let us know at the time. It's kind of cool. Some of these smaller conventions that are local, you have actually like a chance to play with an author of something. And here in the local South Texas area, we have Arc Dream Publishing people living in the nearby, and people who write for Savage Worlds live nearby. So sometimes you can sit in on a session with them, and inevitably what they're doing is they're play testing the future product, which is kind of cool. So this, and I think I talked about this in my podcast, but he eventually did publish it, and I actually have playtesting credit in it, which is kind of neat. So I have an outline for an adventure for Delta Green that I just gotta, I can do the outline. I know in my head what's going to happen, but then what I really need to do is sit down and write it up,
Definitely. It's just
briefing and background, and
you just got to just make a start. I reckon it's making a start, and you'll probably just get into it and you'll be away.
Yeah. But looking behind the screen. Well, I mean, he didn't have a screen, but when Mr. Ivy was running his adventure, he just had a notepad and he had a bunch of notes, and they were full though. He didn't really have anything typed up at that stage, but he had notes that he was taking. He was taking suggestions from the table for things, because he said, "Hey, I'm playtesting this adventure. I haven't really written in all the details, so I might ask you to supply some."
It is interesting.
So I think the first step would be to actually get this adventure to play test it and see if it actually works. And I have the outline in my head. I have it the first, if it's a play in 2 acts, I have the first act already planned out, and even a virtual tabletop set up for it. Because I kind of ran it at the convention that my wife and I tried to put together right at the start of the pandemic before things totally shut down. We had like a virtual con, and I had a couple players, but one dropped out halfway through, so it wasn't the best to play test. But I'd like to try to play test it again and see if it actually works. At least the first act, and I have the second act in my mind. But maybe one of these days.
Well, hopefully you will. And it is, like you say, it is very interesting to see how these designer types and writers go about it. I know sitting with some of the Cthulhu guys like Scott Dorward and Paul Fricker, they'll sit down with a sort of a notepad and say that, you know, they're playtesting or they've got some idea about a scenario. And I would quite often bump into them at our local con in just up the road. It's 20 miles up the road from me. And being the UK, it's a little bit, well, it's a lot smaller. So you do run into, well, the likes of Gavin Norman, and, you know, you could easily run into Ian Livingstone and people like
Shea Webster.
Well, I've never run into Jay, actually. I always bump into John Large and Pete. Who else? Well, there's not that many others.
Well, yeah, that's like the designers that live in South Texas here, right? So it's pretty cool.
It is, yeah, it is. It is definitely one of the sort of nice things about the hobby. And with the growth of the internet, these people, it's a niche hobby, but the internet somehow makes it bigger, doesn't it? And it puts people in touch that, well, we're having this conversation now. We never would have had this conversation, would we, in days gone by?
Unless I happen to go to a convention in England.
Exactly. I doubt I'll ever get to the States. So, yeah. Anyway, I'm about through with the questions.
Yeah.
We've got some ideas about your future plans. I guess the last...
Yeah, I'm gonna run more and more games. That's for sure.
More and more games, and keep cranking the RPG a day handle, because we've still got that to do today.
Yep.
So I'll wrap this up, Karl. I'd like to thank you for coming on and joining us. It's been awesome. And yeah, well, when I'm back on the circuit, we'll have to get around to doing some gaming again.
Yeah, for sure. Always enjoy having you. Got to come up with the next idea, next historical game idea, maybe.
Yeah, well,
like I bandied about a Downtown Abbey in Cthulhu, for example. The Crown and some sort of spy thriller.
You also talked about a World War II one, a Dark Ages thing. You bandied around the Dark Ages.
Yeah, Dark Ages is always pretty neat. I did have an idea for a World War II Octoon Cthulhu.
That's right.
Yeah, but that one would also be like an in-development campaign game, because I haven't heard this scenario pop up anywhere. I mean, it's just like in science, you know, everyone reads the same things and is trained the same way, and sometimes ideas develop in parallel.
Yeah, for sure.
But I do, that Octoon Cthulhu is still something in the back of my head.
It's always the way. So many games, so little time. Yeah. All right then, mate. Well, you take care.
All right. You too, Colin. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it a lot.
No problem at all. And that, as they say, is a wrap. Big thanks goes out to you, the listener, for taking a bit of time out of your day to listen to Old Spike Pit. Take care, and I'll catch you later.